And I hope you were here for the Reverend Beck Cranford Smith sermon last week on the invisible person. It was truly inspiring. I decided that I want to be Beck Cranford Smith when I grow up, but without the tattoos. And nothing against you if you wear tattoos. I get that. It's just not for me. I didn't plan for our services to be on the same theme, but I believe they work well together. I hope you do as well. In Fredericksburg, Virginia, where I previously served as minister, perhaps about once a month, I would get a call or a visitor would drop by midweek from someone I didn't know, but they were in need. The situations varied in details, but almost always involved some kind of financial crisis. There was often the mention of children, an imminent eviction, the loss of a job, a lack of transportation. I listened to their stories, and I offered a sympathetic ear. I knew that if I was ever unable to listen genuinely, it would be time for me to leave the ministry. I didn't concern myself with the truthfulness of their stories. Who am I to know? And to be candid, that is quite liberating. After they shared their stories, there would sometimes be an ask for assistance. My first response was to talk with them about other resources that might be available to them. Family members, co-workers if they had a job, their church or synagogue if they attended one, others who knew them and who might be in a position to help. Usually, if they were speaking to me, those resources had already been exhausted or might not have been available in the first place. The conversation would continue. I shared that our congregation financially supported a number of community programs, including shelters, specifically designed to help those in need, and not just shelters, but others as well. You'll hear in a minute. In good faith, I told those requesting assistance that the staff of these programs were much more knowledgeable than I was about available resources, and that these other programs were in the best position to offer assistance based on need. Our congregation supported them financially, and I was referring them to these organizations. Many told me that they had already been in touch with those community programs, but that the programs were unable to help them. It may be that the person seeking assistance wanted to be helped in a specific way, like help with a hotel bill, or there may have been some program requirement that they couldn't meet. Again, I listened, but I remained steadfast in advising them to work within the program's guidelines. What I have learned is that these community programs seldom, if ever, give out cash, but instead offer food either directly or through a voucher, or may make a recommendation for an assistance program, for example, to help with utility bills. Or these programs are themselves shelters for those who are homeless. These programs are in place to assess and offer emergency assistance for those in need. In Fredericksburg, the shelter was called a programmatic shelter because it offered a variety of programs to help someone get back on their feet. As I suggested earlier, these programs work for those who are willing and able to follow their guidelines. And yet we are all increasingly aware that many are not able or willing to do so. And so we are left to ask, what about those who are perennially homeless? In 1984, I moved to Arlington, Texas, to work full-time on my master's degree in computer science. For those who are new, I was a software engineer for 13 years before entering the ministry. As a full-time student, I lived in a large house called the Cornerstone, which served as a college ministry for a local Christian congregation where I attended. While living in the Cornerstone, we would, from time to time, provide temporary housing for someone in need. This is where I first met Dusty. Dusty was a boyish-looking young man. I guess we were all boyish-looking back then. He was pleasant and charming. A resident of the Cornerstone helped Dusty get a job bussing tables at a local diner. It started out okay, but with time, problems developed. Dusty was easily frustrated and had difficulty following through on simple tasks. Sometimes he had difficulty getting along with coworkers, and sometimes he didn't show up for work. Dusty eventually lost another job. And when similar difficulties arose with his living at the Cornerstone, Dusty was asked to move out. I don't know what Dusty's diagnosis might have been. He might have had a marginal personality disorder, or he might have simply lacked adequate social skills. What Dusty came to symbolize for me is that there are people in our community who will, more than likely, never be able to hold a steady job. I don't mean to sound defeatist, only realistic. I find support in this belief in words attributed to Jesus when he said, "For the poor will be with you always." I can hear Jesus saying, "For the homeless will be with you always." I can imagine that the very best social program could be offered to Dusty, and eventually one day he would walk away. The structure expected of him would be too much. He would be back on the street, living from day to day, handout to handout. Here for me is an engaging paradox. Despite my claim that we will never eliminate homelessness, poverty, or joblessness, we must act as if we could. I'll say that again. We will never eradicate homelessness, poverty, or joblessness, but we must try to do exactly that. And by our actions, ease the burden of those who struggle so mightily. Given that the homeless will be with us always, how do we greet the impoverished of the impoverished? In our society, we have ample opportunities to meet people who live on the street. I can imagine that when Dusty loses his boyish good looks, he will be holding a sign, "Will work for food." We must not judge him harshly. In fact, we must not judge him at all. In many religious communities, there is the claim, "There but for the grace of God go I." This is a humbling acknowledgement that had I not been born into a life of privilege, had my family been more dysfunctional, had I never developed adequate coping skills, had I not found within myself the resiliency to confront life's hardships, I too could be living on the streets. We must confess that when we meet someone living on the streets, we have no idea what their life circumstances may have been or may be. We have no idea where they fall on the continuum of mental health. We have no idea what tragedy may have befallen them. For many years, when I visited my father at my childhood home in Tucker, just east of Atlanta, I invariably saw Paul walking the streets on his way to or from the Waffle House. Paul lived in a group home not far from my father's, just a block. My father told me that Paul had had a nervous breakdown during his military service. He received numerous forms of treatment, and yet he remained ever so fragile. You could see it in his walk. Paul didn't live on the streets, but many do, and many ask for money. I'm not suggesting we pity them. Rather, I'm suggesting we treat them respectfully and courteously. Often we see an apparently able-bodied man or woman asking for money. We ask ourselves, why doesn't he or she get a job? But truthfully, we have no idea what their circumstances may be. It could be dusty, you see, on the street. We may feel that most people who ask for money are people who refuse to do an honest day's work. But we must not get caught up in the horror of prejudging them. We must not fall victim to the tragedy of a hardened heart. In our new location on Canton Road, we are having many more people stop by our building seeking assistance. This morning, I will tell 3 stories. The most recent story occurred last Tuesday, just 5 days ago, when I was leaving Emerson and I met a woman and a man in our parking lot who had come here looking for assistance. There were others here at Emerson, and so I invited them in. I listened, and I was saddened by their plight. They told me they were hungry, they had no place to stay, and that Must Ministries was full. I gave them food from our kitchen that was not labeled as belonging to any group at Emerson. If it was your food, I apologize. Please label your food. Or don't label your food, and it will go to a good purpose. To meet their housing need, I called the cold weather shelter at the extension. That's where I spent last July as a volunteer. The extension director offered to come pick them up. They have a cold weather shelter there. But the couple who was here had a car, so that wasn't necessary. The cold weather shelter at the extension is for men only. But the director assured me that women would be accepted at Must Ministry Overflow. The couple left with a full plate, a place to stay for the evening, and seemed genuinely appreciative. This is not always the case, because many individuals want help in a specific way. They want me to help them in a way that I'm not willing to. What I am clear about is that I am willing to listen. I will not judge. I will offer any food or warm weather clothing that I have, and I will do my best to connect them with programs that can offer short-term housing or long-term assistance that I believe will help end their cycle of being in crisis. 2 months ago, I had a somewhat troubling experience here at Emerson. I was again leaving for the day. It seems to happen when I'm leaving for the day. And a man was in our front parking lot in his car. He asked if I had a few moments. I said I did. I was alone, but because we were in the front parking lot, I was happy to speak with him. I did not and would not have invited him into Emerson because I was alone. As an aside, it is my policy to always park in the front when there are just a few of us here or when I'm here alone. And as another aside, if I am alone at Emerson and someone asks to use our restroom, I will direct them to the Kroger. I've researched it, I found it, I used it, it works. The Kroger is 0.6 of a mile south on Canton Road, and it's open to the public. The man and I spoke standing next to his car. I learned that life had not been fair to him. Nothing in his entire life, he said, had ever gone right for him. As he spoke, he became increasingly upset and he cried uncontrollably. And then he spoke about the churches that never fulfilled their promises of providing help. Never, he would yell. And as he spoke, he became angrier and angrier and angrier. And it gave me great pause. He didn't ask for assistance, and I offered none. I told him I was genuinely sorry that life was unfair to him. I tried to help him see some successes in his life, but there were no bright spots, he claimed. When his car wouldn't start, I hung around. Thankfully, his car finally started. At the time, I probably would have given him a ride. But if that were to happen today, I would have offered instead to call the police for him, not on him, to offer him assistance. But I would not have given him a ride in my car. I don't think it was a safe thing to do. The final story I will tell occurred on a Sunday. It was 10 minutes before the service was to begin. A woman was in serious financial need. I asked if we could wait until after the service, but she said her need was pressing. So we sat in the sanctuary right there, and I listened to her story for 5 minutes. I indicated the service was about to begin. I invited her to stay. She was welcome to have any food that we had, and after the service, she and I could talk further, and I would try to connect her with agencies that could provide her help. She was clearly disappointed with me, hoping that I would provide her with cash assistance. I said I would not. She left before the service began, very dejected, very despondent, very troubled. I tell these stories not because there are easy answers, but because in this wonderful new space we have the opportunity to wrestle with these issues. I'm glad that we are no longer tucked away in a nice neighborhood. This is a nice neighborhood, but we're no longer tucked away in that beautiful neighborhood we were. Here on Canton Road, we have real opportunities to serve the community, to welcome all who come to our doors, and to learn to do so in a way that is safe and also respectful of those who are in need. I have never heard anyone at Emerson speak ill or derisively of those who are seeking assistance, and I am genuinely grateful for that. As Unitarian Universalists, we affirm the inherent worth and dignity of every person. Men and women in our faith tradition have worked tirelessly to affirm the rights and needs of many groups whom society has deemed unworthy. We have been leaders in civil rights, women's rights, gay rights, and advocated for so many more. The impoverished and homeless need our kindness and advocacy as well. I think that's why it was so important what we did with Reverend Beck Cranford Smith a couple of weeks ago. Working to end poverty, homelessness, and joblessness is more than a lifetime's work. And yet, to offer a smile, respect, common courtesy is a priceless gift that costs nothing. May we keep this space sacred as we affirm the dignity of all who come through our doors. May it be so.